Welcome to another edition of Salalo More program that we sponsor here in Omaha, Nebraska. And today we have with us Herzon Maina Warui, who's a Kenyan citizen and who attempted to participate in a previous program that we had on our Salalo thing, but we couldn't get a chance to get through it. But he was kind enough, regardless of the logistics we had, to come back and let us interview him to talk about some of these issues. We want to talk to him about some critical issues happening in Kenya, impacting obviously his country. That's where he's at, and also a little background on him, just provide a brief background. Mr. Warui is married, has 3 children. He is in the cleaning business, and he also shared with us, particularly in the carpet cleaning business. And he's also one of those guys who's connected to many people in his country and people in his community. One of the points that he made in one of his intros to us is that he's a family-centered man. He focuses on masculinity, and that's an issue we're going to talk about a little bit today with his expertise, and also his role of just interacting not only as an entrepreneur or business person, but also having the pulse of the people in his community and in his country in mind. So Mahina, welcome to the Salalo More program, and tell a little bit more about who you are and give us a little bit more background.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. I know this is the second time that I'm getting the opportunity even to talk more about the topics. And I'm really excited about the whole issue. I think, as you have lightly mentioned, and you have done a good introduction, I'm the group CEO. I have a cleaning company that has been in existence for more than, I think now 13 years. We are in Kenya. We are also in Tanzania. And we're also hoping to go East Africa. That's Uganda, Rwanda, and Ethiopia. They are good upcoming markets. But more so, what drives us as a company is the fact that we want to touch people's lives, and we want to Kenya. About 80% of the Kenya population is the youth, and our aim is to make sure that we empower the youth so that we can inspire them to do what inspires them most. So our main role is to touch people's lives, and more so Kenya being, and I think I'll have an opportunity to talk about that later, being more of a patriarch society. I'm so passionate about men. That's masculinity, because I realize when the masculinity is in shape, I think they'll know how to take care of ladies. They'll know how to take care of their families, and that's it. That's what we do.
Good. Well, appreciate that. Now, many residents of the United States need to be made aware of some of Kenya's achievement, and I've read books over the years and so on. But oftentimes, people in this country don't know a lot about the continent, particularly in Kenya and so on. Can you give us a brief overview of your country and its importance to the world community?
Wow, Kenya is such a great country, and I know mostly when they hear Africa, they may not know even where to put Kenya. Kenya is in East Africa, the eastern side of Africa. In fact, Kenya, we have so much fast. When you hear of the world runners, most of the runners, the long distance runners, and they break the records in the Olympics, in Commonwealth, they are from Kenya, from one of the counties that's in the middle of Kenya. Kenya, we also happen to have the first African woman who won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Oh, wow.
She was the late Margaret, she's called Wangari Maathai. Also, Kenya, we have one of the natural wonders in the world. That's the migration of wild beasts. Mm-hmm. And you need to come to Kenya and visit Masai Mara around June all the way to September. We have about 1.5 million wild beasts migrating from Tanzania, coming to Kenya. And it's such a nice spectacle when you see the jackals, when you see the lions, when you see the cheetahs, all the leopards try to hunt them. As they cross the rivers, you see the crocodiles trying to eat them. We also have Kenya, we have a lot of historic sites where the fossils were found. That's in Turkana, where they have dug up fossils. They are able to read and know what were the existence of men. And also we have about 533 kilometers of the coastline. That makes it Kenya. We have very nice beaches. You can come and rest there and have a good time. I think its significance, what you can see about the Kenyan significance to the world, is because Kenya is the biggest economy in East Africa. In all the countries surrounding us, we are the biggest economy. And what that means is that 80% of all the containers, the market in East Africa, most of their goods pass through the Kenyan port, and that is in Mombasa. So Kenya is such a good thing. And then when you look at Kenya, the other day was made a major NATO ally by the US. We also have the UN headquarters here in Kenya.
Oh, wow.
We also have the front line in terms of when you're beating when the Al Qaeda, Al Shabaab, we are the front line in containing them in Somalia. So Kenya is such a good country in terms of geographically and its importance to the world.
Wow, wow. So a lot of that we did not know. Now, I understand, in my reading, it was the East African writer Ngugi wa Thiong'o. I mispronounced his name.
Yeah, Ngugi wa Thiong'o.
By far, he's one of the best writers on the continent. I've read a lot of African novels and books, but he's in another zone. I think he lives in the United States. But one of the things I know is that he talks about language. And one of the questions I'm going to ask you here is, what are the major languages spoken in Kenya, and how is it possible to live there without knowing some of the native or indigenous languages for people who want to come and visit or live there?
Well, that's nice because the fact that Kenya was colonized by the Britons, by the British, so that means by that fact is that Kenyan we speak a lot of English.
Okay.
Even our schooling system, we are taught English. So that means about 30 to 50% of Kenyans as we speak, they will fluently speak in English.
Oh, wow.
That's number one. Second, we have Swahili. Swahili is more of an Arabic language, and it's widely spoken in Africa. So Kenya, we have 80% of Kenyans who are speaking Swahili.
Okay.
And after that, we have the indigenous languages, which are now more or less community-based or ethnic-based. But that means when you come to Kenya, out of the 80% who is speaking Swahili and 50% who speak English, you'll have an opportunity to communicate even if you're a foreigner and you're understood.
Now, I know the language Kikiwi. Is that the one he spoke?
Kikuyu.
Okay,
Yeah,
and there's some
Kikuyu
other two major languages that indigenous to the country.
The indigenous is Kikuyu.
Okay.
We have Kikuyu. We have then we have Luya.
Lua. Okay.
Then we have Kalenjin.
Okay.
Then we have Luo in that order.
Okay, and I also know some of those languages are spoken in surrounding countries as well as Uganda, and so on. And so I know there are different groups who speak those languages, so it's multilingual here. Switch up a little bit. I know you work with many different ethnic and racial groups. We call them racial in the United States, between black and white and so on, in your country. What is it like for low-income families in Kenya? I know that, again, sometimes we wonder about how people who are at the bottom struggle in our societies, both in the United States, Europe, and on the continent of Africa and Central and South America. What is it like for the average person who's low income or has some challenges with some of their economic opportunities in your country?
Well, truth be told, I think Kenya, we have about 77% of the population living below the minimum wage.
Okay.
And I think, as I had mentioned earlier, is that when you look at, we are about 56 million people.
Good point.
And out of the 56 million people, the 35 years and below is 80%. In fact, when you look at our the middle line of our age is about 19.8 years or so. So what you're simply saying is that we have quite a big number of people who live below the poverty line. And what that means is that, and especially, I don't know whether in your state, but in Kenya, 60% of the people who live in that, the low income, they spend 60% of their income on food.
Wow.
Yes. And what that means, like now, some of the indexes of the inflation in Kenya, we are talking about between 2.5 to 7.5%. So that means the moment that inflation goes high, it eats on their disposable income. So I can say it really truly affects them because they are not able now to put food on the table, or you'll find them now skipping a meal. So you'll find them people who are used to taking 2-3 meals in a day. you'll find them taking 2 or even 1 meal a day.
Wow.
So that it will accommodate the inflation. And for the second part, we'll talk about the social services. The government has tried. And I think one of it is what you have just alluded to when you were starting the conversation, that people are making fun of it. There's something that the government is trying to introduce. It's called, I think, SHIF. That's Social Health Insurance Fund, which is not it has not been well accepted in the market. Do we have NSSF? NSSF basically is National Social Security Fund, where the government wants you to contribute a certain part of your pay towards your retirement, and whatever you are paying, your employer should match the same.
Oh, wow.
So if you're giving 3%, the employer should give 3%. And for that's a statutory deduction. It's a must by the government.
Wow.
And the same as what I've just mentioned. Then you also have the pension and the provident schemes that are individually or independently offered, so you can enroll as a citizen. We also have things like the WIBA, that is workman compensation. If in case you get an accident, it's an insurance. If you get an accident at your workplace, you can be compensated. We also have group personal accident covers, which again the government encourages, but that one they don't enforce. They encourage the employees to do that for their workers, so that in case there's an accident, they are able to be compensated.
Wow. You know, I'm
Yes.
surprised as you sharing that, because a lot of it mirrors some of the stuff they do here as safety nets. And I know many African countries are wrestling with many of the people with high unemployment, and how do you make sure that people go with basic food, shelter, and stuff like that. So it's good to hear that some of those things are in place there. And one of our concerns and more is, how do we challenge the income disparities in our respective countries or society so that we don't forget folks. I want to ask a different kind of question. This may be a little bit more challenging. You have a president there. I know that there is a president, some recent challenges with the president, William Ruto, I think, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it, and the conflicts with his administration and services to the people. What solutions can we help reverse the negative issues? And again, I've been seeing some of the issues on YouTube, and we see it in the global newspapers of what's going on. How can we help transform, from your vantage point as a person who's in the country, to help many of those country residents in light of all the negativities we're hearing about different administrations and so on?
I appreciate that, and I really appreciate this question, because it's quite a challenge, as you have rightfully said. And I think when you're asking that question, or when you post that question, or when you're posting this question, what runs into my mind is a book I read about the dysfunctions of a team. And one of the things I appreciate is that the president may have good intentions in what he's doing. We may, for lack of a better word, I like what he is doing, but I don't like the way he's doing it. And simply is because some of the decisions he is making, he is leaving, the shareholders or the stakeholders are being left behind. So you find, like now, I'll give an example. Currently, when you look at a worker's payslip, when you look at the pay as you earn, when you look at the SHIF, you look at the NSSF, you look at the housing levy. When you look at the kind of deductions, in fact, somebody was making fun the other day, is that why should the government should take my net and give me the taxes and give me the deductions? because when you look at it, the deductions are getting to be more than what you're taking home. But that was on a light note. But on the second part of your question, how we can reverse, I think one of the things that the president needs to do, and intentionally do, is to have citizen engagement. I think that's something we are lacking in Kenya.
Wow.
So you find that the president will just go make a decision, which becomes very unpopular. When he makes the decision, the people who are seated on the table to make the decision, chances are above the 35%, the 35 years I'm talking about. So the 20% makes the decision for the 80%.
Wow.
So you find that the citizen feel left out. So they feel we are not part to this. And you see, talking about the 80%, chances are they are the more taxpayers, they are the more paying more tax
Right.
than the 20%.
Right.
Because the 20%, we're also talking about the senior citizen. The senior
Right.
citizens are somewhere there.
Understand.
Yeah. So I think that's one. That's the citizen engagement. And I think another thing I also felt that the government and the president should be, I'm not his advisor, and I wish I was, is I think there's also the digital transformation.
Hmm.
The success and the speed of delivery of services in Kenya is very poor. I'll tell you up to now, if you're driving on a Kenyan road and you're found with a mistake, the policeman will get a booklet with a carbon paper and write for you a note, intention to appear in court, and then tear it, give it to you. That time could be you're based in Nairobi, but you had gone for Mombasa for holiday. That's about 500 kilometers away. And they tell you you need to appear in court there in about 3-4 days to come. And at that time, you're supposed to be back in Nairobi.
Hmm.
So they have not taken care of, they have not taken the technology part of it, the digital part of it, where you can go and be given an instant fine. And now what that does is that when I am told that I need to appear in court in Mombasa a week to come, and I know I need to be in Nairobi, I'll find a way out.
Hmm.
And the way out is corruption.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, that's corruption. You have to give 2,000 Kenya shillings. That could be, is about what? It's about 20 or about $15 or so. Then that thing is withdrawn, so you can come to Nairobi free.
So
You
help
get
me out, because some of us understand this concept of corruption not only in the United States but in the global community and Central and South America. It is openly done where you actually give the police officer or law enforcement the money, and other people can see that happen
in fact, sometimes they demand.
right there on the spot.
Exactly. In
Wow.
fact, even if America you think is a cancer, in America is an ailment, is a common cold. In African countries, that's where the cancer is.
Wow. I
They
mean,
will receive it.
as an African born in America, as we say, I knew about Nigerians doing stuff, and I found out in South Africa it's going like that, even in Botswana, where I spent a couple of years. But I'm surprised it's so blatant and so brazen, where they're taking the money where other people can see them, and there's not an anti-corruption group or entity that stops that foolishness or thievery, as we'll call it.
One thing I realize and I appreciate is that the corruption is a system.
Mm,
It's a system. It's not an individual. It's a system.
okay.
So basically everything from all what you're talking about, all those organs, because why do you need 4-5 organs to fight corruption? Well, at the point of inception, you are getting onboarding somebody, you can get somebody who is clear, who is has values.
Cold-blooded. I hear you. Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
in fact, sometimes you're making joke that Kenya should have a ministry, and corruption ministry.
We also need that here in the United States and elsewhere, because people have very sophisticated ways of doing kickbacks or bringing their cronies
Yes,
into government. I have this romantic notion of Africa. It was almost 45 years ago that I was
right,
there. And so I see the world completely different than those who've been there through this whole journey. And so when
right,
people describe this, I'm almost like, that's not the Botswana or the Southern Africa that I knew, because they didn't have those high levels of crime or corruption. If
right.
they did, as a Peace Corps volunteer, I didn't see it as a young man who was 22 years old and 23 years old. But as I getting older, people tell me these stories. I'm like, are you making this stuff up? I want to
It's
switch up if I can. And I can't. In the West, many folks are focused on sexual orientation. Again, as Africans and African Americans, we have a different bent on that. Obviously, we talk about racism and so on, in contrast to racism and other issues. Why do many African countries differ from white Western mentality regarding sexual orientation? How do we communicate that in a much more detente way, where we're not imposing values on other people and their culture and so on? Talk to me about that, because you alluded to you're into masculinity and maleness and I assume familiness. But talk to us about this whole concept that there's a divide on this whole concept of sexual orientation? Give me some of your viewpoints and ideas.
I think that's one of what can we say? I think it can be one of it's an elephant in the when you look at it. But one of the what is happening with the African society, being one born and brought up here, is that by the moment you are born, you're told you're a man and you are lady. And from there, the roles you take, the roles that are given to you, they fit that. And even at the point of, could be at the age of 13, 14, when you go now through the rite of passage, because in Africa, there's something we call the rite of passage. And again, it's a bit different from society to society. But from my society or from my ethnic background where I come from, I know for a man at the age of 13, 14, you're supposed to go and be circumcised. And before that happens, you're supposed to sit down with men who are there before, and they tell you what it means to be a man. So what that means is that my sexual orientation has never been in doubt. Has never been in doubt. And I know when I fail, there are the consequences to the same. And I also know, and that I think one of the things that also you have mentioned, why I talk of maximized masculinity is because I've realized that most men get that the European and the American culture and they get lost. They get lost to a point where they don't know who they are. And the moment you don't know who you are, whatever comes your way, you're going to abuse it.
Right, that's true.
Whatever you don't understand, you'll abuse it.
Right.
If I don't know whether I'm a man or a lady, in fact, it's funny that where I am now, I have boys who are looking upon me. And the fact that I portray that I don't understand who I am, that means I'm also devolving or also giving some this confusion that I'm passing it down.
Right.
So for me, what I believe is that being a man is not a feeling. Is by birth. The fact that you're born a man, everything that relates to a man you need to do. And the blueprint that you should have is of men who have been there. And I'm also, I don't know whether it's right to say this, I also incline so much to the Bible. That's me. So sometimes I want to look at men in the Bible. What have they done? Look at David. What is it that he did? And again, I also realize that some of the men that we're having in Kenya that have issue with orientation is because they've been wounded by their fathers.
Say that again differently. You said they've been what by their father?
The men that have issues in terms of their identity, they have been wounded by their fathers.
Oh, wounded by their, okay, got you. They've been
by their fathers. Because the moment you have a wound or you have a relationship with your father, you struggle with identity.
Like a trauma. I understand now. In other words, there's been some upbringing that was done at a young age. And I have a colleague who says that some of the folks who act different or weird, some of it is socialized, some of it is just a fad, but she also alluded to sometimes the very thing you just pointed, they had some childhood traumas related to some kind of a misjudgment or dealing with them as a person. Okay, I understand that now. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. So I think just to make fun of it, I think the first time I had my dad tell me I love you, I was 40 years. That's the first time I had my dad tell me, son, I love you. All along, I never heard that.
Wow.
And so that means if I got another man outside there told me, Maina, I love you, I could have interpreted it anyway.
Right.
But until I decided to empower myself to empower others, now that's why I decided I have a right study and I know my orientation, that I know it right. And the same case as ladies. Even men who are being wounded by their mothers, they struggle with relationships. You'll find a man who cannot handle any relationship, even they don't know how to handle women.
Right.
So for me, I think in Africa, we have no issue with that. And when you come to Kenya, I'll take you through, when I'll be taking you to Masai Mara, I'll take you to another tribe called Masais.
I know Masai.
No, for them to be a man, you need to go and kill a lion. So you not see a lady go to kill a lion.
Right.
Yeah, so they have no issue to know who the man is. They know they are a man and I need to kill a lion. Yes,
You know, the reason I find that fascinating is I've been reading the Kenyan, Uganda newspapers or blogs on their website. And I understand even here how some people have used their orientation as a weaponized against African Americans and Black folks in general and use it as a bribe or as some kind of a way of trying to get people to reverse their culture. And again, it's part of that historical racism we as Africans experience not only the colonization, but the neo-colonization. One of the reasons I find fascinating about South Africa is that when I was in Botswana, almost 45 years ago, the South African experience mirror almost verbatim how it was for African Americans in this country and how we were oppressed, except they were in the majority. And as I was tell people on the continent, they say, "What is it like?" I say, "It's just like being at home because the experience they have, particularly in Southern Africa, mirrors our." And you listen to the music. Obviously, we have the different languages and so on, and so it's very important. And then the other thing, had a chance to go to the South Africa. My wife, my late wife, was a Tulsa, and so had a chance to go down to the Transkei and those areas, and I saw a completely different area than Botswana, and became so much acclimated or used to that culture. And I said the only difference between us is we speak different languages. But when you hear people crack African jokes or American jokes as African Americans, they have the same kind of humor, and it's just interesting
right.
the candorness. And people have been brainwashed historically by our dysfunctional plantation educational system, or in the case of the continent,
Right.
colonial education, where sometimes we as Africans grow up, we don't learn our language. You got those people they talk out of their
Yeah,
nose
yeah. They
and
want
they
to
want to.
imitate. Yeah,
Right. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
these are issues we got to continue to push back as Africans and deal with the diaspora of issues of us facing. But something I want to come back to this. I think orientation is very important. I don't want to miss that, and we'll come back a little bit to it because I think we don't oftentimes hear from, as we say in this
Right,
colloquial, the horse's
right,
mouth or from the true source, or how
right.
Kenyans or Ugandans come at these points. And again, as you talk about the initiation, right, become very important. But let me not hijack this agenda, but ask you a different question. A recent news article mentioned a blogger, and again, his name escapes me, but I was following it where he will be spending many years in jail, according to 20 years I saw. And I don't know if he's in jail or not, but he was clowning the president. And again, we
Yes,
value freedom of speech in democracies. And I know when I was in Botswana, they told me as a Peace Corps volunteer, I couldn't make fun of the government to do that or can be deported. And there was one clown, a white guy, who said some stupid stuff in the newspaper and they sent his butt
right.
home when we first started. But my question specifically is there freedom of speech in Kenya? And what can we say about the government official, the president, without getting in trouble or going to jail? And that's when I asked you initially, can this interview get us in trouble
I,
or get you in
I,
trouble?
I want to be careful so that next time I'll still have an interview with you. Again, I don't want to say something. But I think having said that, I think last year, that was 2023. When you look at the Article 19 of the Global Expression report, I think it ranked Kenya number 69 out of what? Out of, I think, 161 countries for freedom of expression. The Kenyan constitution, as we speak, protects the freedom of expression, but with limitations. It has limitations. And now these are the limitations that are usually abused or misinterpreted. And what are some of those limitations? Because it says you can seek, okay, you can receive, you can share information, okay, and ideas. For that, you have the freedom of. But when you're doing the same, when you're expressing and you're exercising your freedom, the people must respect the rights and the reputation of the other person. So that means you can say all what you want to say. But now the courts will determine if by doing that, you also have shown respect to the reputation and to the right of the other person. Which that's a
Mm.
very thin line now. That becomes a very thin line. Because now that determines the kind of lawyer you're having. If your lawyer can argue the case well, you might walk away with it. But again, the good lawyers in Kenya, they are very expensive. So for me, I can say we have the freedom of expression, yes, but with the limitation.
So you need a good lawyer, in other words, what you just said.
Uh, I'm saying we don't have it. Let's say just say that.
Okay.
You only have it if you have a good lawyer who can argue a case. Because right now, as you speak, we are having some young people who are going to the streets and they are blogging all this. But what is happening? You'll feel they are no longer, they have been abducted. You cannot see them anymore.
Wow, by the authorities.
Yes, by the authorities. They are killed.
Wow.
Yeah, it's happening in the Kenyan media, and it's very unfortunate. So basically, what you're saying, every time you're speaking, you have to look on your side,
Who's around?
who's around, and if you need to write, you need to think 4, 3, 4, 5 times before you write.
That is sad to hear that. I make an assumption, or we make an assumption when the country says democracy, it means you get to say what you want to say. Now, I do remember in Botswana, I was speaking in the language Tatunawa, and I might have been talking about the president of the country here, and I said something negative, and I noticed that people in the country, in that room, cringe because you can't say certain things about a head of state, even though the head of state was not the best at that time, and I was criticizing. And today, I know there's some people in different countries that catch hell for criticizing the government. In this particular article in Kenya, it says the guy was criticizing the policy of the government, and he threw a couple of barbs at him, and that's how he got in trouble. And so I think we got to talk more about that down the road, because I think
Right.
in this country, you can say almost anything about a government official, local, whatever. He's not protected or she's not protected because they work for the public. And we have a lot of leeway. Again, people have made fun of President Trump and again the current
Right.
president. And it's obvious that people mirror that in other countries, but you get in trouble. So I think it's an important concept. I want to ask you a different question about, we talked a bit about corruption. How quick can you talk about corruption in public? In other words, you talk, and you shared earlier, I mean, that it's like a part of the system and so on. How do you reverse it? Can you really talk about it without getting in trouble? Because you just alluded to you can get hurt by saying certain things in public by government officials or law enforcement.
Well, I think Kenya, I always tell the men I speak to that corruption being a system, and it fights back. I can tell you for sure, it fights back. Try to fight it, it will fight you.
The corruption.
Yeah, right. Go to any office, you are very clean. You say, I'll not take any bribe. This is how things are done. Oh, just a matter of time. You'll find yourself you have been shifted to another office or even been sacked.
Wow.
So what I usually tell people, I think for corruption to stop, it has to stop with you first. Because for a very long time you have been talking about it, it needs to start from the head. But the head you have no control of. But I think if you can have intentional men, like there's a movement, one of my company we are involved in. It's called unashamedly ethical. It's from South Africa, where we, as business people, we have said that will not get involved in corrupt deals, or will not get corrupt, will not get corrupted anyway. But let me tell you, it is hard. It's difficult. In fact, I can tell you it's almost impossible. Because you'll go somewhere and somebody will tell you on the face, boss, oil the system, things will move.
Wow.
If you don't oil the system, you can wait another 2, 3, 4 weeks.
Wow.
You get, and so it gets to a point where you just hope and pray that all those systems will work for you, no matter how corrupt the systems are. But when you look at even when we got the devolved systems, the county governments, I think one of the things that the government did was to devolve corruption.
Mm-hmm.
So fight every cycle, every election cycle, we are having 47, because we have 47 counties. Every election cycle, we are developing 47 billionaires.
Wow.
47 billionaires. If another somebody was also making a joke. We have one school, we have a college of training police. It's somewhere in central Kenya. A place is called Kigajo. And because when you look at index in Kenya, the police are usually ranked as the most corrupt. any corruption items that's done in Kenya. So they were saying Kigajo, that police training college, has produced more millionaires than Harvard School of Business.
That's cold-blooded, man. That's throwing out some heavy light, as they say. You throwing out some shade on some folks there.
Right.
Wow, wow.
Yes, yes.
You know, when reason you were saying that, I was sitting there thinking about the tender system in Botswana and South Africa, where you have these head of states who get tenders out, or the people who are their subordinates, and they give it to their friends, and so you got this maldistribution of money from the government that should go to more
Right.
people. And sometimes it'd be much easier for the government to just make government workers and do the job versus giving it to
Right.
their millionaire friends. And I look at the previous president of Botswana, who actually went and lived in South Africa for 3 years or whatever he was and came back. I'm like, how did he survive on his so-called limited government salary? Well, again, they got
Right.
all these cronyism and stuff. And again, I get to say that because I'm not living in the country and I'm not afraid of anything. But sometimes we have to have outside people challenge us as Africans to do better. That's when some of us supported integration, bringing other groups and tribes in our circle to challenge what we see as norm to deal
In
with.
fact,
I see the tender system, as you said, producing these millionaires and people who definitely can't do the work and are incompetent, but they have friends in high
exactly.
places.
Exactly. In fact, just to put a rejoinder, the other day we impeached our deputy president. And one of the things that we made him is abuse of office.
Hmm.
We fight he was giving tenders to his sons.
Wow.
And we're talking about tenders of what, billions of Kenya shillings. So the question is, you see, there's no equity because then they have a higher opportunity to get the tender than me. Why not
Right.
allow me also to get the tender?
Wow. It's
Yes.
almost arrogant. Well, even the previous president, they got a new one now who's from Mahalapi, where my wife is from. He's also, I understand, Tulsa.
Mm.
But what was fascinating is that the previous president wanted to put his wife on the payroll, and just it was so silly and stupid. I'm like, how do you do that? I mean, again, there's a certain amount of money you may give to the first lady, but he also wanted to bring his kids in. And I'm like, are you
Yes.
serious? But what neophyte who's a politician would think of just doing some nepotism that's so blatant and not expect people to push back when there are many young people in many of these African countries who are unemployed. They've gone through
Yes.
school, got their education just like here. Many African Americans who can go to school and get their degrees and find themselves with higher unemployment than white folks who have high school diplomas versus a college
Right.
university degree. So that's it. We're getting close to the end, and I wanted to kind of talk a couple other points I want to make sure we cover. Many African Americans and Africans and so on about throughout the continent have never been to the continent. I mean, I'm not saying Africans who were born on the continent, but Africans who live in the United States. I meet Africans
Right.
who have parents are both from Africa, but they've never been home. And there's some Africans I know who've been here so long they almost forgot their language, their native language.
Yes.
And my
Yes.
question
Yes.
to you is, what would it be like for them if they moved to Kenya? And the reason I say that is because a lot of African Americans are going to Ghana or some of those countries in West Africa, and some go to Southern Africa. But what would it be like if somebody came to live in your country or live in Kenya who wants to move to a better place in a warmer climate, obviously, where you have some decent weather and
Ah,
so on?
well, I like that question because it's very insightful and it's very hot. I can say it's very thought provoking because when you're American and you have never been to Africa, you come to Africa. There's a lot of opportunities in terms of like even the digital world. We are just scratching. Whatever we are now enjoying now, there in America was there way long ago. So
Hmm.
when you come to Kenya with an open mind, there is a way you can mine so many opportunities. Another thing, expect that Kenya system don't work the way American systems work. So that means there's a lot of frustrations. If you're expecting to be filing your returns with a push of a button, or you can pay for insurance in a push of a button.
Or go to the bank without going to the bank.
Yeah, you'd be in a rude shock. If you think the way you'll fight could be a house is warmed up and there's a bill for that, nothing like that. You fight roads, the road network there is good. Here, there are potholes in the middle of the capital city. So corruption is there. When you're stopped by a police, in fact, they are looking for an opportunity to get a coin or two from you. And if you think you're smart enough, they will waste you a lot of time and they'll let you see like the justice system is too expensive.
Wow.
But there's a way out.
Wow.
But on the flip side, or the better side of it, Kenya is a very warm country. And the brotherhood country, when you come to every household in Kenya, you'll have a cup of tea. People will have time for you. You don't have to work 24 hours or 18 hours. 8 hours will be enough for you.
Well, you remind me of when I was traveling from Botswana after I got married. I went to visit my in-laws. My mother-in-law lived in Botswana for many years as a refugee. And so I went to visit my wife's uncle who's in the Transkei near Butterworth, Kwekwe. And I was traveling through South Africa. And as I got to a road, what they call one of the Bantu stands or or something, the police officer had never met an African American. And he stopped me at the border and he invited us to his house for tea because he was so fascinated to see a black person who spoke English only almost. And it was nice. First, I was scared, like, why is this guy breaking into his house? He's going to kill me or hurt me? He was just so fascinated to see a black person who had so much melanin or so much blackness in his skin speaking English, who's from America, because he's heard about music and jazz and that, but he's never met one. And I was on a rural road going my way into Southern Africa. And it's about a 22-hour drive from Botswana to the edge of South Africa, but it was fascinating. But I want to defer back to some other points, and again, we can deviate a little bit. You alluded to more than once is if we listen to the words and comments that you say, there's things we read into that. And I notice you talk from a masculine and you talk about manhood and so on. And then in Namibia, they have written in their constitution that women have to be 50% of government positions, which is fascinating because, again, we have the patriarchal, chauvinistic, and in Botswana, I noticed when I look at all those pictures, there are a bunch of men running around like a bunch of hyenas. I say that very seriously because if we respect our mothers and sisters and daughters, we want them to have the same opportunity as men. Genetically, it's like religious people saying black people can't be of this church because they're black and so on and so on. So my question is, how do you make sure that women are included in society when they make up 50% of your society and that we as men don't exclude them, especially if we love our relatives who happen to be of a different gender? How do we make sure there's participation of women at all echelons of our society so we're not using them? And I use the example how white people treated us. Should we want us as men to treat women the same way as slaves or as servants and so on? So talk to me about the gender issue and how you address it being a married man. And I don't know if you have boys or girls, but how do you deal with that? I assume you got other relatives who are female. How do you deal with that from your vantage point?
I think that's good. When you look at Kenya, I think since the time of like the second president of the Republic of Kenya, used to be called President Moi, he brought up the mentality of empowering a girl child. And from that time, it picked up so well. So we have so many organizations in Kenya that basically all their main role is to empower a lady.
Gotcha.
The Maedelea Wanawake, we have feeders, and we have all that. And again, we see that was also picked by most churches in Kenya. Most churches will have congregations that are geared towards women only. The women of the ladies, Women Without Limit, Queen's Catholic, so many kingdom women, so many. And in fact, I can tell you, when you look at the current Kenya today, a lady is more empowered than a man. And that's why now we are coming in, at least also to try to put some equality between men and women. But having said that, again, the Constitution of Kenya has gone ahead and empowered women more. And I like that because women are more, they are better managers. For me, and I think the time Jack Ma.
You say women are better managers? You talking about something personal here, or you talking about overall in society?
No, I remember when Jack Ma came to Kenya, the Alibaba gentleman, and he gave a speech. He said the largest population in his office they are women.
Wow.
Yes, and I think I've also done that because I have a large number of women in my office, and things work. So what am I saying? In Kenya, one of the things that the constitution has said is that in parliament, we need to introduce a third rule. What that means, no one single gender should be more than a third.
Well, now you got to translate a little bit. When you say one third, you mean
What I'm
1/3 of
saying,
the gender
if
should always
like
include
now,
women?
if we introduce something called like a third rule,
Okay.
a third gender rule. So that means if there are 100 members of parliament, more than 70 should not be of one gender. But basically, they were talking about women.
Is that the case today in Kenya?
Yeah, that it's okay. It's not, and the current parliament was taken to court because that was not observed, and I think it was even declared illegal. The Kenyan constitution, the Kenyan parliament should be dissolved, but it never happened. And again, in every county, we have an elected women representative.
Okay.
So one thing I can tell you in Kenya is that women are well represented.
Got you.
If today, and one thing I do, if today, and God forbid, my wife decides to beat me, it will not make news. In fact, I'll be like, oh man, what kind of man are you being beaten by a lady? But if I do the reverse, and God forbid, I will rot in jail. So what you're saying is that the government is really has opened its eyes to women because there's also so many cases of femicide, and even currently they have really gone up. So for me, I'm somebody who believes in empowering a lady, and my wife is well empowered. In fact, he's my co-director in a company.
Co-director, I like that.
He's a co-director. And again, by the end of the day, I'm a son to a mother. I'm a husband to a lady. I'm a brother to a sister. And I'm a father to a girl. So I'm a bit privileged.
Yeah. So appreciate that. You know, I'm gonna do what we call an audible in football, where you call a play before you can get to the line or get to the line, and so they call it an audible. So I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions that may be a little bit random here. And I'm a fanatic about African music. And actually, in fact, I love particularly Southern African music, but I got used to Zaire music, Kenyan music, West African, and so on. And just as a thing, if you're gonna throw out a popular musician in Kenya, who would be the musician that you see as one of the top persons that you appreciate in terms of what you like in terms of music from somebody who's indigenous to your country?
Yeah, there's a gentleman, is a group. They're called Sauti Sol.
Okay.
Sauti Sol. And even when the president, the President Obama visited Kenya, they had an opportunity even to sing, to perform. But for me, my music basically is, we call them Zilizopendwa. Zilizopendwa means those old good days music.
Got you.
And most of them are usually from Congo.
Like Tabole and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, the
That music
coffees.
is Zaire. Even Tanzanian friends we have, they love the Zaire music. Well, I would say South Africa's best. Obviously, Brenda
Right.
Fassie and Hugh Masekela and Baron
Yeah,
Bacchus
the
way
Brida
back.
Fosse, yes,
But
yes,
and
yes.
Brent, you know, you name it. But there's old school music as Africans. I don't care where you come from. Even the guy who did Sweet Mama, those are classics. But again, you have to be older to understand that music back in the day. So that would be one of your number one groups then.
So for me, I think Congolese music. We call it what? What do we call it? We call it Lingala.
Okay, Lingala, right.
Yeah, Lingala. I
Right, I
like
know
it. I like
Lingala.
it.
I know very good.
I like it.
And then the other thing I'll switch up on you. If I would, when I was in Botswana, the thing that I really liked was pudi or goat meat. I mean, I developed an appetite for the goat and the lamb, but more goat. And then of course, you have the beans and the samp and millie meal so on. But if I was coming to your country as a visitor, what would be one of the traditional foods that I would eat as an outsider that you would introduce me to?
I hope I'm not just saying this because you need to come. You need to come. You promise you will come.
Hey,
There's
I'm afraid of
something.
an airplane, as they say in Botswana, cephalophobia. I sometimes have a hard time flying over water, but let's keep going. But give me an idea what we eat if we come together and have a meal in Kenya.
There's something in Kenya we call nyama choma. Nyama choma is roasted meat.
Okay.
You roast the goat, the ribs.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
In an open fire, then you put a foil on it and hide it under the hot coal.
Wow.
for some time. The moment you remove it, you just pick a rib and the meat will go its separate ways.
Wow. Wow.
Then you do that with something we call ugali.
Okay.
Ugali is just corn flour mixed with hot water until it solidifies. And then you do the seasonal vegetables. We can do
Mm.
spinach, we can do kales. Then you do that. After that, oh, Kenya, there's no party without meat.
Got you. No, I understand
Yes.
that. Well, matter of fact, I was telling somebody years ago, went to somebody's house, these were Americans, and they served a meal without meat. And someone says, "Well, you think I have no teeth?" You know, or sometimes you serve somebody some hamburger or a million or what they call ground beef. Say, "Well, hold on, I
Right.
want the regular meat you can chew on." And so there was always little jokes we made about people who are vegetarians. But again, I know I got a daughter who's a vegan, so I understand that well.
Yes.
Before we close it, we only have about maybe 6 or 7 minutes. I want to ask you two other questions here. Um, in terms of your educational system, we didn't talk specifically about that. What is when you graduate from college? What is it like, or high school, or whatever? What is it like for the job market for young people or people in general? Once you get that degree or diploma, is employment a challenge there in Kenya, like in other parts of the continent?
Yeah, I think when like me, I am a graduate. I did maths in my undergraduate.
Hmm.
I did mathematics, BSc in maths.
Okay.
But what happens is that in Kenya right now is when they're trying to change the system. But before that, the system would make you more educated, but not learned. So you
Explain that. Explain what you mean when
yeah,
you
yeah,
use that concept.
you become we say like you become a fool. You have gone through the campus, but you're still a fool because you're not ready for the job market.
Got you.
You're not ready for what is outside here. So you're coming there with a lot of maths in your head, a lot of education in your mind, but when you come to the market is not ready for you.
Got you. That makes sense.
So you'd find there are people who go to technical colleges and do those technical courses, and they become more marketable than you who have a degree.
That makes sense.
In fact, you'll be surprised in Kenya, the time when I started my career, when I left campus, I got a job as a clerk, as a teller in a bank, as a cashier in a bank.
With a degree.
That's not doing BSc in maths.
Wow.
I went to a bank to be a cashier. And one of the guys I found in a bank was an engineer. And he was still doing what I was doing.
Mm.
So basically, what we are saying is that we are half baked. By the time you get out of campus, you are half baked.
That's funny. I like that half baked. You're not
Yeah. So
good.
until you get something outside to bake you fully, you're not able to be served.
That makes
And I
sense.
think that is one of the challenges we have had in the education system. And when you come to unemployment, let me tell you, and unemployment in Kenya is the greatest issue we are having. Right now, go to in Kenya we tout they are matat we call them the buses. The buses you'll find people hanging. In Nigeria, you see that in South Africa. Most of those guys who are hanging in those doors, they are graduates. They have
Wow.
done degrees, but they don't have a job. There's no formal job. They cannot be absorbed in the market because first the opportunities are too small, and second the opportunities that are opening up they are so competitive that they don't stand any chance because
Mm.
somebody will want a 6 years experience. I left campus yesterday. Where do you want me to get 5 6 years experience?
That's sad.
Yes.
That's sad. One of the things I was going to say, and I really want to compliment you on, is your internet connection. There have been some interviews we've had in Southern Africa, Botswana, you name it, where people have had a hard time with bandwidth and so on. And obviously, this interview has gone perfect in terms of our bandwidth. We haven't had to mess up or anything. And so, do you have high-speed internet in Kenya in your house or in your company now yourself? Because apparently your connection is very good, and that's one of the challenges we face when we're doing international telezooms or teammates is making sure we get adequate computer bandwidth so we can talk like this. But what are you using there?
First, I think Kenya is rated among the countries that has the best coverage in terms of the internet.
Wow.
One of our service providers, our internet service providers, is Vodafone. And also, of late, the other day, we are lucky to have your gentleman from America, Elon Musk, to introduce the Starlink.
I heard about that.
Yeah, the Starlink is also in Kenya,
It's
and
in
it's
Kenya
giving
now.
everybody a run for their money. Yeah, it's in
Wow.
Kenya.
Wow.
Yeah, it's in Kenya. In fact, what the Kenyan government overlooked is that they didn't have any way to regulate an international person coming with their own satellite to provide internet.
Wow.
Now they are looking to UN. They are telling UN, you people get us ways to regulate this person because he's coming and he's no competition. He's killing all the competition around.
I can imagine.
Yeah, exactly. But having said that, our the local the Safaricom, it's 5G. We are using Wi-Fi. I just have a router in one of the rooms. In fact, I'm in the house.
Wow.
Yeah. So in one of the rooms, so I'm able to get it, and the kids are able also to use it to watch the TV and all that, and their gadget. So Kenya, I think, even in terms of internet, we are good.
The reason we did an interview with some people in Namibia about poaching, and apparently back in the day under Kama, they were shooting Namibians who they caught in Botswana, and some of it was done unfairly and unjustly. So we had that, but we also wanted the person we're going to interview. Her bandwidth was terrible, or so on. And so I understand it's going to help that, but it's going to be ready. We're down to our last minute, and one of the last questions we oftentimes ask our guests is, as we really appreciate this interview, do you have any closing comments for our listening audience, both not only in the United States or in Kenya, or those who will tune in and watch this YouTube or in our programs? Any comments you would say that we didn't cover you want to share with our audience at this point?
I think for me first is to really thank you for creating this opportunity for me to speak. For me, I would say Kenya and Africa. I don't know so much about, I've traveled a bit of Africa. I don't know about America, but there are still people who genuinely need to hear what we are speaking now. And people who, whatever we are saying now, will impact them to become better people.
Wow.
And for this, in Kenya, let me tell you, I can tell you, and I hope I have a minute. The other day, I was called by a certain principal of a school, and I'm told there are two kids who have not paid school fees for 2 terms, and he wants to chase them away. Whether I can come in terms of CSR and pay for the school fees. And I was like, oh, the economy is a bit challenging, but okay, bring. How much is it? For the 2 terms, I was told it's 4,000 Kenyan shillings.
Translate it to dollars. Translate the dollars so we can understand.
When you change it to dollars, with about, even if we say it's about 100, we are talking about $25, 25, or could be $30, right? School fees for 2 terms for 2 kids. That's what they have not paid. That's a money we can comfortably spend and misuse at any given time. And I said, if we can purposely say that whatever we do is geared towards giving such kids education, I'm sure this interview, 10, 20 years to come, it will be totally different in terms of corruption index, in terms of the impacting the society. And I think for me, that's what I would say.
Right. Well, Mahina, I really appreciate you being on the show today and talking to us about issues in Kenya. And again, related to the diaspora or the continent. Our concern is how do we bridge these gaps and deal, obviously, with racial healing, but more than anything, help us develop the social capital, the relationship, learn about each other. The last point I want to say is that before my wife passed, we had a chance to watch a South African woman talk about a South African writer, female. And we got much involved in Plaki. Plaki was a South African who tried to come to the United States back in the 1930s and and so on the 20s that build a relationship, and he was not as successful as he can. And one of the things as Africans throughout the continent, throughout the world, is that we got to do a better job supporting each other as other
Right.
Europeans do to support using funds and elsewhere. And so this is a very valuable interview for us, and really appreciate you being here. And we hope we get a
Thank
chance to
you.
do some more interviews with you because we really enjoy your candor and your honesty, and more than anything, your knowledge of throwing out some heavy light to our viewers or our participants so that they can see this as a beacon of how we can climb out of this cesspool that we
Right.
experience in our respective societies. So thank you very much for being on today, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again. And as we always say, may the force be with you, and Baroko.